Hello, everybody. It's John Browning with the Building Your Life podcast. Once again, we are back with a really interesting guest. And his name, hopefully I get this right, is Atul Minocha. Some of you who are involved in the business world may know that name, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, who is this? I know this name. I know this name. Well, he is the author of the book Lies, Damn Lies, and Marketing. And those of us who went to business school or are involved in business may have read that maybe more than once. And you can see it if you're on YouTube, you can see it in the background there. But he has some really unique perspectives from his life that I'm looking forward to chatting with him about, some myths that we tend to believe and ways that we might want to change our thinking just a little bit. But Atul, nobody can introduce yourself better than you can introduce yourself. So tell us a little bit about what you do, why you do it, and even get into a little bit about what we had chatted about before, which is that first lie that high performers believe. I thought that was really interesting. But what is it that you do now? Why do you do it? How'd you get there?
Yeah, first of all, thanks, John, for having me on this podcast of yours. Looking forward to this conversation. So, I'm going to, by way of introduction, I'm going to start from the now and work backwards a little bit. So, yeah, like you said, I wrote this book. This is actually one of my COVID babies during COVID. And the reason the book came about is that for the last 13 years now, I've been a partner at a firm called Chief Outsiders. We typically work with CEOs of mid-sized companies and helping them untangle themselves from any growth issues they might be experiencing. So, they bring us in to sort of help them figure out how can they get back on the growth track that they had envisioned and planned. So that's what we do. And
Okay.
one of the things I discovered in working with the CEOs is that they generally have a very poor opinion of marketing. They have been burnt before. They have wasted money. They couldn't figure out how it worked. If it worked, they couldn't know. They couldn't tell what really worked. And then here I was, and I'll tell you that I didn't grow up thinking that I'm going to be a marketer. I was dragged into marketing, so I'm going to go to that part. So here I sort of said that look, for the 30 years or so, I've loved doing marketing, even though I didn't choose it as a profession. I loved doing it. How come I love it, and how come these CEOs have such a poor opinion of it? So there was a sort of a disconnect there. That's when I started digging into it. That's what led me to write the book, because what I discovered is that many of my peers, meaning other marketeers, they overpromise, they say the wrong things, they think they can do a lot more than they can deliver, which leads to a bad taste and a bad experience. So that's
Mhm.
why the book is titled Lies, Damn Lies, and Marketing. What I'm trying to show is the bad side of marketing and the real marketing. So I told you that for the last 13 years, I've been doing this for mid-sized companies. Prior to that, I worked for large corporations, as large as Toyota Motor Corporation, which was actually my
Wow.
first job. And so I'm not going to walk you through my resume, but in my very first job, and before that, I did mechanical engineering. I wanted to be a car designer. I studied engineering, not because I got into a good school, but because I wanted to be a car designer. That was my chosen profession. So when I got hired by Toyota, I was thrilled. I mean, it's like today if you were graduating and you get hired by Anthropic or Claude or OpenAI or even Google, you feel that your life is made. So that's how I felt after doing engineering. But on my very first day at the job, the CEO who hired me, this was a Toyota's project, but project in India. So it was Toyota, but they were just getting into India.
Yep.
And he said, I'm going to put you in marketing. I said, oops, like, what happened here? And he was an engineer himself, so he understood where I was coming from. But he said, look, we already have 6 engineers. I was actually the 19th employee at that point. That's how small the project was. And he said, I have only one marketeer and we need to focus on marketing. So he said, I'm going to get you to do marketing for us. And in 2 years' time, when the organization is bigger, when we really have an org chart with real boxes and real titles, Then if you want to go back to engineering, we'll talk about it. So I said, okay, well, at least I got myself in the right company, maybe not the right job, but heck, I'll do it. So that's how I got introduced to marketing, and frankly, I stayed there. When the opportunity came to go back to engineering, I said, no, I'm loving marketing so much, and I'm using my engineering in marketing, which I do even today. You know,
That's
so I
interesting.
never
Yeah.
felt that I disabused or misused my education. I feel that I've actually got educated, and I got educated more by experience, learning the psychology of marketing, consumer behavior, and things like that. So yeah, that's a long-winded introduction, but there you have it.
Yeah, that's similar to when I graduated from college. It was one of those, I had a business administration degree, and you couldn't buy a job back in the early 90s when I graduated. And I took whatever I could, and people were like, oh, you must have really wanted to be on Wall Street to go from, a kid growing up in West Virginia to Wall Street in New York. And actually, I was in Chicago. But the truth was, I took whatever job that I could get, and then I just did whatever I needed to do. And suddenly I ended up working in some big Wall Street firms and learning all kinds of neat stuff. And that's where I am today. It's, you don't always choose. You think you choose, right? In college, we all spend so much time thinking about what's our major going to be, or what are we going to go into in the trades or whatever. But as you mentioned to me when we were talking before, the first lie that high performers believe is that they choose their path, right? You you thought it was going to be engineering,
Yeah.
ended up in marketing, which you kind of hated, right, at the time.
Oh, totally. I mean, as a student, as a teenager growing up, I had a very low opinion of sales and marketing people. I felt that they were charlatans. They had their hands in other people's pocket, and all they did was talk. They didn't really create any value. They pretended to do things that, even as consumers, nobody wants. We like to buy things, but nobody likes to be sold to. So we have a poor opinion of, let's say, a used car salesman, right? So I grew up with that mindset, and then I made a career in a field which I didn't think was worth my time, and I did it happily. I'm not, no regrets. If I had to replay it, I'll probably do it the same way. So yeah, and
Yeah.
and I think I want to make sure that I don't come across as a rolling stone that doesn't know where it's going to roll to. Um, you do need to make a few choices, directional choices, but then not be upset about when you have to take a pivot left or a pivot right, because that's how life is. So I'm glad I did engineering. I'm glad I applied for Toyota. At that time, I wasn't glad that I was pushed into marketing, but in hindsight, that was one of the better moves, which was out of my control, not my choice, but it ended up being quite well. In fact, just to sort of put a pin in this point, when I look back at my corporate career, I worked for, I don't know, five, six companies, all in the Fortune 500,000 kind of level globally. And within those five, six companies, I probably had 15 jobs, progressive jobs. And if I had to guess, out of those 15, 16 jobs that I migrated to from either within the company or to a different company, probably half of them were thrust upon me, or somebody else say, hey, we're going to move you here, and half were my choices. When I look back, I cannot say that the ones I made choices on were the better moves. Some of the best moves that happened to me were the ones that happened to me, not the ones that I raised my hand for.
And
So
me,
that's life.
yeah. And it kind of leads back into my one of the next questions that I wanted to ask you, and that we had talked about goals, and in my business we talk a lot about goals,
Mm.
and you set these goals, but the fact is that if a lot of life happens to you, it's really about being adaptable and sort of rolling with the punches, but
Mhm.
the goals are just there for the psychological support, maybe. Or I'm not sure. How would you describe that? What's your feeling on the idea of setting goals?
Yeah, so this is yeah, I knew we were going to get to this, right? Um, so the goals are useful. I'll tell you what my issues are with how most of the world treats goals. First of all, people have come to believe that unless you can put a number to something, it's not worth talking about. So if you
And by
cannot
the
measure
way,
it,
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second. You just heard that correctly from an engineer.
yeah, an engineer, yes, yes.
Yeah, just okay. Say
A
that one
proud
more time.
engineer.
Let's
Yeah, a
reiterate
proud
that one
engineer.
more time. I like that point. That's really
Yeah,
yeah.
no, a proud engineer. No regrets. I'll study the same thing again. And I still, like I said, I still practice math. I take pride in my capabilities to handle data. So I think we have come to believe that unless you can put a number to something, it's not worth measuring or it's not important. Uh, I mean, even Einstein is attributed for, there's an attribution given to Einstein for saying this, and I'm not sure if he actually said it or not, that sometimes, what's important cannot be measured and what's measured is not important, or something to that effect. I truly believe that to be the case. Just because you cannot measure it doesn't mean it's not important. Take love. What unit do you measure love in? And who will argue that love is not important? And you could say, okay, that's personal. What about business? Well, and even in business, how you feel about an employee, how you feel about a boss. I mean, do you say, I love this boss? Okay, 8.2, what are the units? No, you know it when you know it, right? So that's one criticism I have, and one not maybe it's not criticism, but maybe it's an acknowledgement that just because you cannot put a number on it doesn't mean that it's not important. So that's how I treat my goals, so to speak. So I have many goals which I would call directional. So as long as I know that I'm moving in the right direction, I don't need to know anymore. Why? Because as long as I know that I love my boss, I don't need to know is it 7.9 or is it 8.2. Uh, you know,
Right. Hmm.
you know,
I
and
think that's super important. I hope people are really listening there to what you're actually saying and not just like glossing over this because you're not saying that goals are not important. Goals can be very important, but they're directional. And I love the comparison to love. Well, how much do you love me? My wife has never asked me that, I don't think, but you just know it. It's kind of like when I talk about innovation and investing, innovation happens over time, but you can't put a number on innovation,
and you
but
cannot put a
you know it
timeline
when
on
you
it
see it.
also. That let's innovate by in next 7 days.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to realize it's important to maybe have some in place so you know the direction you're going and check yourself every once in a while. But one of the things that I struggle with in my business, because it's wealth management, it's all about numbers, right? Is realizing that just because something is logical, I actually have a chapter in my book that I wrote, the build a life, not a portfolio, that is about our decision making, and it kind of addresses that very same thing. And it gives the example of when I bought my Harley Davidson motorcycle. The logical decision was the black one that had a little bit more power and was newer and less miles. And bottom line is, I struggled with this decision. The logical choice wasn't the one that I wanted. I wanted the one that had the red uh, metal flake and with lots of chrome
Right.
on it. That's the one I wanted, and that's the one I ultimately bought. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And there is no metric associated with that. Let me give a business example, okay? For because I think many people will say,
yeah,
okay, that's all very good, but let's bring it to the business world.
right.
So this is not my example, but I truly understand this and can relate to this. This actually comes from a gentleman, a British guy, Rory Sutherland. He's now vice chair of Ogilvy. and he's very fond of giving this example. Uh, there was some British rail company which still runs the train from, let's say, London to the tunnel to cross over to France, right? So again, I'm probably misquoting the numbers here, but so they were trying to sort of say it takes 3 hours, let's speed it up, let's reduce the time to 2 hours and 40 or 50 minutes or something, so that people will take the train instead of flying or something like that. Okay. So they're trying to sort of they recognize that to win against the alternative of flying, they need to speed it up. So it was an easy goal for the engineers, kilometers, speeds, this, that, time saving, measurable, right? These are the kind of things the engineers love. I mean, this is where we are. This is how much I delivered. Cost you $5 billion, but we delivered. His point is that it would have been cheaper by two orders of magnitude. 5 billion versus, I don't know, whatever the 1/100th of that is, 500 million. If the question had been reframed, instead of saying, can we shave 20 minutes off a 3 hour journey? If instead the question was, can we make the 3 hour journey more enjoyable? Where people will say that I'll rather take a 3 hour train than have to deal with the airport issues. In fact, he says that's the kind of question Disney would ask.
Right.
How can I make your stay more enjoyable
How
so
can I
that you
make
don't
the
even think
experience
about it, you don't
better?
even look at your watch. In fact, he comes up with an example where he says if we just hired some young, attractive models, male and female, who were running around the train serving champagne or wine, people will say, "Can you slow it down?" And you have a better experience. So again, how do you measure joy? There's no metric on that, but minutes saved, kilometers, speed, that is all measurable, and people gravitate towards that. Whereas the real thing, which will probably make a difference at a fraction of the cost, is adding value to the experience, where people will say, I'm not going to fly when I can take the train. So in the business world, I think there are many examples. If we just allow ourselves to not stay trapped in the metrics. Again, I'm not dismissing metrics. Metrics are important, but I'm saying when we get trapped in metrics, sometimes we forget to see the forest,
Yeah. And sometimes we forget to dream, right? I talk
and
about
sometimes
people.
you forget to dream or imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you don't move forward. So that's like super important. One of the other things I wanted to make sure that we get to, and all these things actually tie together, they're very related, is this hidden pursuit of happiness trap and the idea that there's a work-life balance. Because you have some, I love your take on this. So I'm just going to let you talk about those two things.
Yeah. So let's start with the work-life balance, right?
Mhm.
So over the years, and it has become increasingly more frequent as I've grown older, is that people have been asking me, and frankly, people started asking me even, when I was in my 40s, as to when do you think you'll retire?
Yeah.
And even back then, my tongue-in-cheek answer used to be, I'm already retired. And wait. You work 60, 70 hours a week. Well, what do you mean you're retired? I said, okay, let's talk about what retirement is. Retirement is you say you get to do what you want to do when you want to do it. I said, that's pretty much what I do. So, by that definition, I'm more or less retired because I love my work. I, so now I'm doing what I want to do when I want to do it. And if I stop loving it, I'll look for a different job. And I usually do. And I go somewhere else. So, in other words, I am living a retired life by that definition. Okay.
Right.
And I'm getting paid for it. So, in my I mean that's how it started, right? So I've come to and now in my latest work life, which is with Chief Outsiders as a partner for 13 years, this is absolutely true. Absolutely true. It is more true than it ever has been. I get to choose the clients. I get to literally work from anywhere because we do most of our work remote. So I could be in Dubai, I could be in Borneo, I could be in Canada, and have a client in any part of the world and do the job, right? So for me, it's not really work-life balance as if they are in two different parts of the scale. To me, for most of us actually, work-life is a blend, whether we like it or not. We try to cleave it into two parts, which is part of the challenge. But I've sort of said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make sure that my work is something that I truly love, so I can enjoy my life also. Why? So if you love your work, if you love what you are doing, then you don't have to put them in two different sides and try to sort of balance them out because you are working. So what's the upshot of all this? How does it show up in my practical schedule or my calendar? So if you looked at my last 13 years calendar, there's not a single day that I've marked as a vacation day. Not a single day. And I've traveled all over the world in the last 13 years because I can do it. I can work from anywhere. So and in fact, I've come to the conclusion that actually when you travel to different time zones, it makes it even easier. Why? Because if my client is in the US and if I'm in Malaysia,
Point.
I can have those meetings late in the evening in Malaysia, you know. And during the day, my client is sleeping, so I get to do the safari. I get to go into the jungle and do what I want to do. And of course, I'll take a nap here and there and whatnot, so that I'm
Occasionally,
ready for a
occasionally
midnight
sleep.
call. Yeah, yeah. But what I'm saying is that you kind of flex and you manage, right? And that way I can live the life I want without choosing between, oh, today is my work day, or no, today is my vacation day, and I'm not checking my phone. I never go anywhere without my laptop. I never go anywhere without my phone. I never put out of the office message on my email. Why? Because I'm not, you know.
Yeah.
So
It's very similar. The more I talk to you, the more similar I find that we are, although sometimes it drives my wife a little bit crazy, but I do tend to go ahead and answer the phone if I'm not doing anything, and then she does remind me, and I've heard this before, that if you kind of have to, and my clients are not going to like me saying this, I kind of have to train your clients that you're not available all the time, but I kind of am available all the time because I like what I do.
yeah,
And I'm pretty good about, hey, if I'm playing with the grandkids or whatever, I don't answer the phone then. But if I'm not doing anything else and I like what I do, why wouldn't I pick up the call at 10 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night
yeah.
from somebody, by the way, in Hawaii, and it's their, afternoon,
It's still
evening?
their workday. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
And that's exactly my attitude. And my clients, for the most part, they know that. So if I don't answer, they don't take it
yeah.
personally because they do know that often when they call me on a Saturday or Sunday, if I can, I will answer. So if I don't answer a call on a Tuesday, that's because I'm doing something that stops me from doing it, and I'll call them back as soon as I can. So it's a give and take. And once people understand what your work style is, I do think almost all of my clients appreciate the fact that I'm available 24/7, and I truly mean 7, don't mean 24/5. And they respect me for that. They appreciate that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that I love that I wanted to make sure I get this, and I actually wrote this down last time we talked. So this is, you actually said this, and I don't think you'll mind me quoting you on this, is the pursuit of happiness often creates unhappiness. I thought that was really profound and a different way of looking at things and very important at the same time.
Yeah. So I don't want anybody to feel that this guy is a psycho and doesn't value happiness. Um, and I'm saying that as much to myself as to anyone else. Okay.
Yes, I understand.
So I also value happiness, but I've lived my life long enough to know if you think of happiness and misery as a sort of some kind of a graph, and this is where my engineering comes in, right?
Hmm.
If you think of this as like a ECG graph, peaks and valleys, amplitudes and drops and this and that. So if happiness is the peak, the valley is misery, feeling bad, you'll find if you plot that, anybody plots that, or most of us when they plot that, our graphs will look very similar. Lots of peaks, lots of valleys.
Yep.
And if you look closely, every valley is preceded by a peak, and every valley is succeeded by a peak. So I mean, there's a certain sequence in it, and there's no, I mean, there's not peak, 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 peak. I mean, there are very few plateaus, or plateaus at the valley. And that is life. And it's just a question of recognition. I don't think any of us have figured out how to change it. I figured out that I'm not even going to try and change it. It is what it is. So my goal in life is not so much to maximize my peaks and minimize my valleys, because I know that's a fool's errand. My goal is to maximize my time in the middle, the fat middle,
Hmm.
which I define as contentment. So if I'm satisfied, if I'm at peace, if I'm relaxed, not terribly miserable, not terribly happy, but I'm in the fat middle, I'm happy, or I'm satisfied, or I am where I want to be. I'm in the zone. Yes, without my trying, I'll get the peaks. Without my wishing them away, I will get my share of the miseries. But that's life.
Yeah.
So I try to stay within what I would call contentment, satisfaction zone, as opposed to looking for the peaks of happiness. So the reason you got to quote me the way you quoted me is that I feel that when people sort of say, no, 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 I need to maximize my peaks,
Yeah.
you won't succeed. And when you won't succeed, that will lead to unhappiness.
Yeah.
So it's again a matter of reframing. It's a matter of reframing as to what's possible and what's not, and what your goal should be. And in fact, I even give credit. I have sort of mixed views on this, and I can argue both sides. I can say that I give credit to the founding fathers when they talked about life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. They didn't attach any verbiage before life or liberty. It was life, liberty, and they didn't say happiness. They said pursuit of happiness.
Mm.
That's, in my interpretation, that's their recognition that the best you can do is pursue it. You may not achieve it. You can achieve life, you can achieve liberty, but the best you can do is pursue it. And my add-on to that is that's a fool's errand. So don't do it.
It's there, and of course, since uh, first of all, that's why I wrote the book, Build a Life, Not a Portfolio. It is really all about this idea, right? Is that money is just the tool. And if we don't decide, or if we don't know not just what we want our life to be, but why we want it to be a certain way, then having a bunch of money is just going to make you miserably rich. And I have witnessed that in multiple occasions, especially when I worked on Wall Street. You're a bit surrounded often by miserable rich people. And so it kind of goes to that. But since I'm a wealth manager, I have to point this out. This is really the same way with the markets. Folks, you don't go straight up. You see times when the market is declining, times when the market is going up, the peaks and valleys of the market. And if your happiness is determined by how big your portfolio balance is at any one point in time, then you're not doing it right. And this is where we talk about income durability and the proper amount of income. Because if you have cash flow, people say, oh, cash flow, cash is king. I said, no, that's not right. Cash flow is king. Because if you have the cash flowing, you're just as happy when the market is down, maybe even happier if you have enough cash flow because you're buying stuff on sale. And that idea of being content with where you are makes all the difference in the world,
Yeah,
right?
I
Yeah.
mean that's. I mean, you have some very concrete examples in your professional work. So yeah, and I've, like I said, I've just looked at my own life and have come to these conclusions that we are discussing here. And and actually, from my perspective, I don't look at my life experiences as that unique or that different from most of my peers or colleagues with similar kind of backgrounds or professional life. What I see is different is whether they have been drinking the same Kool-Aid that most of the world dispenses about, metrics and this and that, or they've sort of stepped back and said, let me think about this. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, maybe maybe the real truth is some combination of different things. And that's what I've done, and that's what I've discovered. So again, like we started out saying, I'm not against data at all. I use data a lot. But I've come to realize that when they say in God we trust and everybody else bring data, I don't subscribe to that. I mean, data has value. In fact, let me quote Jeff Bezos. Even he has gone on record multiple times where he says that when data and his intuition contradict each other, he often finds that his intuition is more accurate than data.
Hmm.
And also when people say, I'm not going to make a gut decision, I need data. Well, guess what? For most people who are above the age of 35 or even 30, where does that gut instinct comes from? It comes from your experiences. Each of the experiences is a data point. So it's your mind that has processed multiple data points and come to the conclusion that when I see this, when my gut tells me this, it's usually this. So gut is usually based on data. It's just a box in which you have collected all the historical data. So I mean I think there's something called business judgment. Where does the judgment come from? Why do you hire people with gray hair? Because there's judgment, right? Where does the judgment come from? From experiences. What does each experience translate to? Probably some data. So judgment and data, they're not orthogonal to each other. It's just a matter of packaging different things together.
You really need both.
You
And
really
you
need
need
both. Yeah.
and you need to understand yourself and you need to understand other people have different points of view, right? All that. But also, I like my grandsons and I, they're little, but one of them really likes green and the other one really likes red. And they're very close in age. So the deal is with grandpa is whenever I buy a toy, I have to buy one green one and one red one and keep everybody happy, right? It's just my job as grandpa to keep everybody happy. But I think that's important to realize that even though something may be very logical to me, and this is where Frank, I'm speaking to me right now because I struggle with this because I can tell somebody logically you should do this in your wealth management with your portfolio or with your tax situation or whatever it is that we're estate planning. This is what you should do logically based on everything I know about you. But bottom line, if they're not feeling it, it doesn't matter how much logic I throw at them. Right. A
Yeah.
really great example is when we've done some podcasts on whether or not you should pay off your house or not. Hotly debated topic. By the numbers, you should never pay off your house. I don't think anybody can really debate me very much on that. However, it's a huge psychological asset.
Yeah.
And some people just want to know, I've got it paid off. And
Mhm.
I'm living in something that is paid off. Whether or not that's the most efficient thing doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
multitude of examples in wealth management. And I think you just have to respect what makes people happy, what
Yeah.
makes them
Yeah.
feel good and content. Not happy, but content,
No, no,
right?
but yeah, and it's all in that sense. In that sense, everyone is and needs to be selfish. So I don't need to live my life by the book of somebody else. I
Right.
need to sort of say that this works for me, and if it works for me, it works for me. And and there's so many different life experiences that I can talk about where it I mean, on a more mundane level, I mean, I travel around the world and all that. So I've developed and I don't suffer from much jet lag. I mean, sometimes I do, but not
Really?
a whole lot. So people ask me, what's your trick? What's your formula? The first thing I share is that I don't have a formula. Okay,
You don't have
and
what?
I don't have a formula for how do I avoid
Oh,
jet
you
lag. So
don't have a formula. Okay. All
yeah,
right.
yeah. Because people will ask me when you're flying from the US to Europe or to Dubai, do you sleep? Do you not sleep? Do you drink? Do you not drink? Do you eat? Not eat? Do you sleep or work? Like how do you spend your 9 or 12 or 15 hours in the flight? So I said my first rule is that I don't board the flight uh, with a plan. That I'm going to sleep, or I'm not going to sleep, or I'm going to eat, or I'm not going to eat, or I'm not going to enjoy wine, or not. There's no formula. And I say that I joke about this that most of my flights are usually long enough that I actually get to do all of it: sleep, work, eat, drink, watch a movie, listen to music. There's enough time to do all.
Yep.
And I said that the reason I don't do that is because what I've discovered in my early career, when I was flying from Minneapolis to Europe often, I discovered that, and those were difficult flights because you land in Europe at 6 or 7 in the morning and then you have a full work day ahead. So I said, generally speaking, it's going to be a tough day. You know that. But I don't want to make it any tougher by landing in London or landing in Frankfurt and saying, oh, shoot, I didn't sleep at all. It's going to be a miserable day. The moment I've said that at 7 in the morning, guess what?
It
It is
is.
going to be worse than it normally would be. So
Yep.
my thing was, oh, I didn't sleep. Well, that's because I watched three Tom Hanks movies. Great. Well, I made that choice willfully. So I should be happy about it. I'm here now. I'll live through it. So don't curse yourself for making bad choices because heck, you made those choices when you were making them, right?
Yep.
So I don't have a formula for sleep or not sleep. Or so I said, do what comes naturally to you. And when you land, don't curse yourself for making those choices because you made those choices because you wanted to. The food was good, the wine was great, so you let yourself lose. It's okay. You know?
Yeah. We were on a trip with another couple, and one of the things that I don't think this has been long enough ago, nobody's going to be offended, but one of the couples they planned everything, right? And I like to have a bit of a plan, but it's enough so that I've made the reservations for what I want to do, enough like that. But I kind of don't like having to say, okay, I'm looking at something really beautiful or I'm learning something really cool while I'm on my vacation, and oh, look at my watch, and I've got to go. And this particular person was like, okay, we're here from here, from here. And we were always like 2, 3 minutes late, and it drove him nuts and it drove everybody else nuts. We were all exhausted and really didn't have that great of a time. We saw a bunch of stuff, but really it kind of wasn't fun. And we're like, let's not go on another trip with this person. And so we just haven't done that. Still friends, but it just sort of drove us nuts. We were miserable all day.
So John, you'll appreciate this. I've actually lived both versions of it. So till
Yeah.
the age of 30, 35, I was like your friend.
Yeah.
Everything was planned, everything, and then no, 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 we are out of time for this. Let's get in the car and go to the next one because otherwise we'll be late for that. We already thought we'll do it. We have to do it. Blah blah blah. Done. Boom. I realized that it's difficult to plan it that way. I wasn't enjoying it. There were many things that I saw along the way that oh no, 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 but next time when we come here next time we'll stop here, but not now because we have to go there.
Mm-hmm.
That was no way to live a vacation. So then I came to this conclusion, which I think you have, which is that. So I also, first of all, I always have the hotels booked because I don't want to land in a foreign city or a town and then have to go looking for a hotel. I don't like that. So hotels are always. So I know where I'm spending the night. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I will have some anchor reservations. So if I'm going to an opera, or if I have to go and see this, or if you certain things required that are must see, must do things and require reservation. So I'll have figured it out that okay, I've got tickets for this castle. Okay, so we got that. But before and after that, I'll leave it to serendipity. And I found that it's a whole lot easier to plan it that way. And frankly, you've taken more of the country, you've taken more of the city, you've taken more of the experiences, but when you let serendipity do its trick. So it's easier and you get more out of it. So, so for the last few decades, I've been a reformed man,
Reformed man, I like it. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's some great life lessons that we talked about today. I hope somebody maybe thinks about things a little bit differently than they did before, and maybe they become not necessarily happier, but maybe more content. And the wealth management lesson that I always like to point out at the end is really building in flexibility to your portfolio and your wealth management through the use of cash flow, which you cannot get enough of if all you do is invest in dividend paying stocks and bonds. There are other ways. Keep trying to get this message across that if you're not generating that income in other ways, you're making things so much more difficult for yourself. But if you can build in that flexibility through other planning means, then that flexibility gives you the ability to be content when you hit those valleys. And in life in general, as we were really taught, life and business, understanding that those valleys are going to come, and planning for the valleys to be there because you know they're going to be there, and having the flexibility to survive, that's what brings you contentment through whatever happens. But I'll let you summarize anything else in case I misquoted something in there or
No, no,
misinterpreted something.
you summarized it very well, and I really enjoyed our conversation, and I think if I manage to uh, give some pause to the conventional thinking of your listeners and viewers, I think I would have achieved my goal. I'm not saying I'm all right, but if you can just pull back and rethink, there may be a few things that you can incorporate in your own life as well for the better. So, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, it's what works for you and ultimately in the end. But
correct.
hopefully you're rethinking a few things after this. So thanks so much for coming on the call. I really appreciate it. I'm going to include your contact information, everything down below. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
So if somebody wants to reach out, by the way, if you need somebody to look at your mid-sized company, this is the guy you want to do it because he's going to look at it from a different perspective than anybody that I know. And that's really what you want to help move yourself forward. And those of you who are maybe new listeners to the podcast, you know how to get in touch with me at guardianrockwealth.com. And all those notes will be down in the show notes. But thank you so much for being on the show
Really
today.
enjoyed it. Thanks for the opportunity, John. Appreciate
All
that.
right. We'll see you again next time.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.